Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mile High Sports Today. I'm Sean Drotar, your host. To my right is Doug Ottewill. We have an opportunity to talk to Doug here and there on the program. You've seen him before, the editor-in-chief of Mile High Sports Magazine. And, of course, you see the ones right back here, the newest issues with Aaron Gordon and Pat Surtain on the cover. You can find those all over Colorado, or you can go to the website, milehighsports.com, and check it out. And, Doug, obviously, this is always a lot of work. These are months of work that putting things together, and wanted to get a chance to talk to you about how it all gets assembled, because, you know, when you're talking about two different covers, something that we've been doing at Mile High Sports for the last few issues, it's things get even more complicated that way.
Yeah, it's the how the sausage is made,
Right.
But I think this one was a really fun issue, and I say that all of them are to some extent, but working with both of these guys, they have people that were helping them to help us. There's a lot of moving parts, but I think, you know, the end results kind of speak for itself. I mean, when you see both of the cover shots, the access that we were given for the stories that we had, I will throw in too, there was a great interview with Nick Benito, which lucky us. I mean, he just happens to be the best, pass rusher in the NFL.
Yeah, he's number half a sack out of first place in the NFL for the team with the most sacks in the league, in the Broncos. Exactly.
So, when you think about an issue and how it comes together, I think there's a lot of work that goes into it, not just from us, but from their side too. But I think there's a little bit of luck involved too. And on all three of those guys happen to be extremely, hot, fire emoji, as the kids like to say.
And planning that out is always tricky, because when you make a magazine, obviously it does take time in advance, and you have to schedule with the athletes. You have to make sure that we get around their work schedules and what they want to achieve. You know, in this case, in both of these cases, with the interview with Surtain and the interview with Gordon, and we'll talk a little bit about them as we go along with the program, and as well as with Nick Benito. Not a lot of it was really about the football field or the hardwood. This is about the opportunity to get to know these guys, what they're interested in when they're away from that. You know, you see Patrick Surtain there with his dog Deuce, the Doberman Pinscher, and you've talked about in the magazine, you've talked about challenges of shooting pets, for example.
There's all the time.
Yeah, I mean, but people want, sometimes to get their animals in there. It's a big part of their lives. We know that, dogs in Colorado, obviously a big part of it, but pets in particular. You have to have a couple stories about that. We don't have to single out poor Deuce here. He's a very handsome, he's a good boy.
By and large, a very well-behaved pet. And I think that speaks to Pat a little bit, because he's a guy, and when you talk to him, when you do anything with him, whether it's a photo or an interview or anything, he's just a detail master. And obviously that's reflected on the field. His assignments are locked down. And that's because that's how he approaches everything. But a couple takeaways I think I have with Pat were, he is as quiet and humble as, we talk about it in the story. He signed at the time the largest contract in the history of the position at the time.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't know if that guy was a waiter at Chili's when you talk to him, because he's that quiet about it. He's just humble. Obviously, in his presence, he's put together. He's got, incredible taste, all those things that, like, this guy smells like money, but he never comes across that way. He's one of the most humble athletes that I think that we've ever worked with. And I would say the same thing about Aaron Gordon too. We went in a little bit of a different direction with his story, but Pat, the biggest angle I thought in the story was what his charitable efforts did. And you and I have been around in sports a long time. There are two kinds of charity efforts when it comes to professional sports. I think there is let's get out there to be seen.
Yeah.
And put your name on something.
Shelters, so that things people, like that. Yeah.
Hire your brother to run that.
Right.
That is one version. The other version is the guys that are seriously invested in whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah.
The John Lynch's of the world, who makes that a part of his professional career. I think Patrick Surtain falls into that category. His efforts with the steam rooms, and you can read about him in the article with Denver Public Schools, they're very unique. They're not a cookie cutter. Well, let's have a dinner and we'll just write a check to somebody. He's very involved, very hands-on. And when you talk to the kids that were the ultimate recipients of this charitable effort, their biggest, most common denominator take on Pat was he listened to us. He came and talked to us. It wasn't about let's go do interviews with the media. It wasn't about take some shots and leave, cut the ribbon and take off. He spent time with them. He did podcasts in their schools with them. And I thought that was kind of, it's always refreshing to hear that it's not just a slap a name on the logo and charge people and write a check to an organization. He rolled up his sleeves, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to attend the Patrick Surtain Foundation, his gala, talking about that, and a fundraiser there as well. And we heard him talk about it a bit. It was kind of fascinating because you're exactly right. What he did is, as they build those STEAM rooms, those science, technology, engineering, arts.
You got the whole acronym.
Yeah. And building those for schools, basically had the schools and the students of the schools make a pitch. Make a pitch as to why their school should receive it. And in this case, two schools, Manual and GW's. George Washington gets that as well. George Washington High School has been the back-to-back defending speech and debate champions in Colorado. They practiced in the hall.
Yeah,
that's not great when you're talking about, the way you need to project, the way you need to perform. I was one of those speech and debate kids, and you could tell by the sound of my voice and how loud it is, there would be some really annoyed other classrooms if I was practicing in the hall. But they made their pitches to why that was important, and not only did Patrick Surtain accept the pitches from those two schools, but then get that built and then work with them on it. And you could see when he was opening those schools, there was genuine curiosity. He's a great quarterback. It's not really a podcaster, right, or works with robotics or things like that. And he was fascinated, been a kid in a candy store watching these kids get in and get their fingers on all the stuff that they knew what to work with. And that is really exciting, because when you talk about a guy like Pat Surtain, his father was an NFL player. That there's money now is different than when his father played, but he's come from money. And you're exactly right. It's really impressive when you get to know him a little bit, to realize that there's no heirs there. He doesn't seem like a guy that came from some money, that had the bloodlines, that had the ins to be able to maybe train a little bit and meet coaches and go to college and at Bama and get those connections. But there is none of that. And everyone who's worked with him said the same thing. It's just work. The guy really likes the work.
Right. And that's one of the things I learned from both him and one of his good friends that I talked to for the story. I think at the end of the day, Patrick Surtain understands the advantages, or the advantage he grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has a very good understanding of that. He had things and he had contacts, experiences, whatever you want to say, that a lot of kids that are highly athletic, highly gifted don't have. And I think he realized not only how that helped him, but also how that can help anybody in any sector. And that's why his projects with DPS are so unique to me, because, and we talked about this, a lot of athletes, and there's nothing wrong with this, they can go out and put on a football camp for kids because that's what they know.
And it's great.
And
that helps kids. That's terrific. No, it's good.
They can be the best camp counselor and teach kids one-on-one and do all those things. I think Patrick Surtain extrapolated from what he learned as a kid and said, you know what the difference between talent recognized and talent wasted is? It's a lot of times comes down to resources,
an opportunity.
And so his thought was, why don't I provide resources for people in other areas, kids that are great in engineering, kids that are great actors, kids that want to learn about art or technology or whatever. And so rather than saying, I'm going to put my time into trying to get the next Patrick Surtain cornerback, I'm going to build a scientist. I'm going to create an entertainer. And obviously that's a lofty goal, and he's not saying that specifically, but that's what my takeaway was he knows that resources can help anybody with talent or passion. And I think that's, at the end of the day, that's what his project tried to provide. And I think he did a tremendous job on it. And it was very clear that the recipients of those understand that was his goal, and really, really appreciated that he took the time to not only think of that idea, but carry it out and really tell them, this is my vision for you guys.
Yeah, and that work will continue, of course, for years to come. Obviously, as Patrick Surtain will be staying in Denver with the new contract for the long haul. One of the guys that the Broncos already look at this point in his career and say they expect to see him up at the Ring of Fame, if not maybe the even bigger one down the road. But obviously, it's exciting to have an opportunity to talk with Patrick Surtain and get to know the man behind the the face mask a little bit. And so that's a terrific thing to take a peek at. And either of the covers that you're looking at, by the way, the content it is the same, of course. And so let's switch to our other subject, Aaron Gordon for the Denver Nuggets. And Gordon just got his way back to the court after battling an injury. We talked to him, a little bit before that, but Gordon's a fascinating guy too, because some of the different things that he's doing, he's fascinated with off the court businesses. We know about the fragrance that he launched, which he referred to and pointed out maybe that didn't go off the way he wanted, in part because maybe the experience wasn't there. He is trying to learn about the world of business, thinking not only current career, but even post-career, what he wants to do, despite the fact he signed a deal with the Nuggets that'll pay him more than $100 million in his last contract, but he still has ideas and wants to get into that business world.
Yeah, another humble guy. And I think that's
the curious guy.
The thing that connects both of these guys on the covers is that they're not just, this is what we do, we're an athlete and we're done, we'll ease off.
Yeah, you'll sit on island sipping Mai Tais. No, that's stuff they want to do.
And Aaron Gordon, I think, is one of those guys. Both of them really, they came from really good families. Aaron Gordon, his mother worked in Silicon Valley in the tech sector. His father was a teacher, and you could tell a lot of that personality came through with him. He's naturally curious. He has several different business ventures, some of which are in the tech industry. Mm-hmm. But just in the way that he communicates and he, talks to people about these things or even about himself, you can tell he is the son of a teacher. He's very humble and he's very inquisitive and he's very curious. You've had this experience when you're interviewing athletes. Sometimes mm-hmm. It can be, I asked a question, you give me the answer. I asked a question, you give me the answer. With him, I thought it was a conversation. He asked as many questions of me as I asked of him because he's genuinely interested in people, in things, in experiences. So my takeaway from Aaron Gordon was that he's a 360 type of person. He's just, you get the feeling he could sit down with anybody in any walk of life, in any industry, and he would not only have a great conversation, but he'd walk away learning something from them. One of the best things that he told me in the interview is he was talking about wanting to get this internship. And
yeah, that's sort of the conceit of the story. It starts as essentially a cover letter.
Yeah. And he said, I don't want to get a special advantage because of who I am. I would love to start in an industry or a business and start at the bottom and learn the hard way, just like everybody else I went to school with. And obviously, for people that know about Aaron Gordon, he was drafted, he was a one and done. And he was making
4th overall out of
millions
Arizona,
of dollars, millions of dollars by the time he's 19. And he looks back and he doesn't think about it as money necessarily. He looks at it and says, I might have missed out on an experience about learning something that I didn't know everything about from the jump and carrying it through to a successful vision. And I think that's kind of what a lot of his business ventures look like, or what he wants them to look like. So I just thought he was a very fascinating, very thoughtful person. There's a lot of angles to him. And I mean, we could spend the next hour talking about the different things that I learned about Aaron Gordon that I never heard before. And I think that's if I'm making a pitch, that's why you should read the article.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. Obviously, he suffered heartbreak. His brother, Drew, passed away in a car accident at the age of 33 or earlier this year. He changed his number from 50 to 32 to honor his brother. That's what Drew wore. But he's also taken on the responsibility of Drew's children and not being just the uncle, but trying to step up and basically fill in as best as he can as maybe something of a surrogate father. And that discussion, I think, was not only really both heartbreaking and heartwarming, but also really fascinating to understand how a person with his schedule, the demands on his time, can still find a way to function in that capacity.
Yeah. And I always hesitate to bring too much behind the scenes into the story. Mm-hmm. But I thought one of the components of this whole process that I found the most telling was, and you've been on this end of this, when you're trying to track down an athlete and you're sitting there waiting for the call and you don't get the call. It happens all the time. Sure. These guys are busy. I'm not their boss. Their boss is paying them millions of dollars. So naturally, we're going to be a lot lower down the list in terms of priority. So in my first attempts to get with Aaron Gordon, I didn't get him. He didn't call. I'm texting the agent, hey, I'm not hearing back from him. What's going on? Aaron Gordon finally calls. Hey, man, I could not be more sorry. I'm like, that's okay. We can reschedule, whatever. He said, to tell you why I was late, because I was at my nephew's basketball game and it was going late and I couldn't stop and take a break for this. And to me, you go from, oh man, here I am trying to get this stuff done on deadline and it's all about me. And then you hear the why behind it and you're like, man, this tells me a lot about what I need to know about this guy. And I found that story in and of itself, which wasn't part of the interview at all, told me so much about where this guy's priorities are, where his head's at, where his heart's at. I found that to be really impressive. And it was sort of one of those, thank goodness he didn't call me on time. I wouldn't have learned that if he had. So, these things fall into place, but I think that stuff tells you a lot about somebody.
Yeah, it is fascinating to get that view, and I think that's what's so great that about still a long form magazine. We understand, you go to websites and you go to our website, and there's a lot of news, and there's a lot of analysis, and there's a lot of things to why things happen and what might be next, and all that sort of stuff. But to actually get into the moments in the head of someone else, it does take time, and it's not something that you can just knock out in a little something that you can scroll through on your phone in 90 seconds and get the gist of it. And so, however you tend to consume it, whether it's the digital version of the magazine or you go get a physical copy all around town, the idea is the same. To really get to know the person, not the player, it takes time, and it takes time to create the stories and write the stories, and it takes a little bit of time to read them, but it's worth it if you're a fan, or if you're interested in the way these players function and what their life is like. So many times in social media, these guys get distilled, right? We have so many stories, and because of the betting world or fantasy sports, that people go at these guys on their social media accounts and complain, hey, you lost me this because you missed that thing, you didn't get that rebound, or you didn't hit that three, or that guy got open and scored a touchdown, and they get reduced to sort of these just stats on a page. And if you really want to understand how a team works, how players work, how any of this happens, whether it's college, pros, these are people. These are 53 guys on a football field. These are 15 guys that can be on a basketball court, and they have lives, and they have things that drive them as well. And I think when you have the opportunity, as you said, kind of a 360 view of the human beings, you actually understand the sport better, because these are played by people. Humans with normal lives, with things that they have that are important to them that are outside of work, just like we have things that are important to us outside of work. And when you start to understand that and start to see these guys as human beings, the truth is, not only, I think, do you look at the sport somewhat different, but when you're cheering for the Nuggets, when you're cheering for the Broncos, you're more invested, because it's hard not to read about these guys and not care.
Absolutely. And that is a thing. And I think it's always a great reminder when we're able to do these kind of stories, when we're able to get this kind of access, that sports fans, consumers of Mile High Sports, they really want to know what's going on Sunday afternoons or Tuesday nights when the Nuggets are playing the Warriors.
And we'll give you all that.
And we'll give you all that. But I think when it really boils down to it, you have the ability to learn about these guys as people. And it's a reminder that they are people. I think, in this day and age where you can play a video game and you can make, whatever football player you want, do whatever he want, all the superpowers in a video game, he's a guy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
He's a person. And I think that's what, both of these stories were really, they really shed light on the fact that these are guys that are really good people, and you should know that about them.
Yeah, it is fun. And as we pointed out, the page one interview is Nick Bonito, and Nick Bonito obviously rolling this year, 11 sacks on the year, only half behind Trey Hendrickson for the NFL lead. And keep in mind that he wasn't playing starter snaps all year. They were still trying to work things out when he was healthy with Baron Browning. They were rotating it in. I think Bonito really started to see the explosiveness at the tail end of last year, and now it's all blossomed. But instead of talking about football a little bit, there were some discussions about how his life might have changed in an NIL world. Obviously, he went to Oklahoma. Would that have been different? But you ended up with some great photography in there. You'll have to look at the magazine to get it, but it's fantastic. Nick Bonito is an anime fan.
Yeah, I learned more about anime from Nick Bonito than I've known in my whole life.
Yeah, and I learned more from the article from Nick Bonito than I learned in my entire life. But Nick Bonito talked about how he got into that and how he actually sort of relates some of his favorite characters into the way he approaches his days and his game. There's just terrific photos with that. And it's another thing when you're talking about, kind of a guy that's making his way and finally here exploding onto the NFL scene. But at the same time, you also remember at a certain point, so these guys are still basically kids.
Yeah. I mean, I would be very interested to interview Nick Bonito today versus when we interviewed him. I want to say this was probably 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because of the amount of exposure that
my.
he's gotten on a national stage. I think when we interviewed him, fun guy, great personality, charismatic, but in reality has never had a forum to really showcase that because he's been obviously a great athlete in high school and college, but on this level, when stardom, literally explodes.
And it took a little bit to get the traction. He's in his third season.
Yeah,
and
it's not like
as a second round pick, there were some maybe expectations that it would come faster. But I think what we're seeing now is something that at the level that the Broncos, it's probably beyond what they had ever hoped.
Yeah.
When you're getting into the top three guys in sacks, when you're in Myles Garrett territory, you don't care what round you were picked in. You're thinking, okay, that was a good pick and that was worth waiting for.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes in these situations, we're lucky to get a guy before he quote unquote explodes because, this was fun to him. We had a lot of fun taking the photos and he got his personality out there. And I think if you're, Carmelo Anthony in his 12th year in the league, he's done it all. This isn't fun for him anymore. Or maybe it is some days, but not others because he's got stuff going on. You talk to a guy like Nick Bonito, who, considering the quality of his play, is vastly underexposed at this point in his career. I felt like we had a forum to get to know him better where he wasn't under the microscope that he probably is right now.
Doug, when you're trying to figure out the subjects for any particular magazine, right? In this football magazine, what we're talking about with Bonito and Surtain as well, in particular, how do you try to identify the guys? Because obviously, yes, we're talking about a Surtain and Aaron Gordon; these are established guys. But when you're trying to find the Nick Bonitos of the world, like how do you try to identify your targets and figure out who you want to get next? Because you have to project a little bit.
I think it's a combination of things. It's guys that are starting to become maybe not prominent, but guys that you notice, just guys that do something that you find interesting when they're playing. But I also think that we tend to lean on a lot of other people. And maybe this is a little bit too much behind the curtains, but Bonito and Surtain share the same PR team. And so I think when you're asking about some of the obvious people, you tend to get some tips about some of the people that aren't so obvious. So I credit, some of those PR teams and agents, things like that, to say, hey, not only should you think about this guy, but have you considered this angle with the guy you're asking about? I think you learn a lot about athletes from the people that know them better than we do. So I think that's, Benito's a classic example. We were obviously talking about Surtain, and just in casual conversations, the same PR agent said, hey, have you done anything with this guy?
Right.
And here's why he obviously we're starting to see like, well, he's had a couple sacks in a row, we know that, but we don't know some of the other stuff. And they shed light on that. And you're like, boom, this is a great subject for an interview. So it happens a lot of different ways. And I definitely can't take credit for all of it, but I think it's a matter of just listening to people and watching and seeing what you like and seeing what other fans like. And then hoping that you get some access to those guys.
I'm one of the editors of Miley Sports Magazine, and obviously work at Woodker and you when we put this all together. So I get it at a little bit later process. But when you think about how long it takes to go from the fact that we have these magazines out and people can go grab them to the time that you're really thinking of building it from the get-go, how much of it is planning, and then what is the time frame in which it takes to execute everything from start to finish?
I would say that an issue probably takes, from the time we start to line things up to the time that someone gets it in their hand, 6 to 8 weeks, pretty easy. I think the first couple weeks is let's throw out some hooks in the water and see what fish bite. I mean, obviously we have our own priority list, as you know, internally of who we want to cover and what kind of stuff we want to write about. Some of that's out of our control. I mean, I can say I want to interview Pat Surtain, but I got to have Pat Surtain say, yeah, let's do it. So there's always sort of that, like, let's make a priority list of who we want to get and what we want to do. And then once you get those commitments, you have bumps in the road. Interestingly enough, both of these guys within the time frame of when we had scheduled photos and interviews were dealing with injury. We talked to Pat Surtain about 6 days after he was ruled out with a concussion. We talked to Aaron Gordon. We were supposed to do something with Aaron Gordon literally the day after he had the calf strain, so that was pushed back a little bit. So, you know, there's certain things that you can't control, but I say 6 to 8 weeks because that allows a little bit of that flex that you can, you know, change things if needed. Then when it comes down to the writing and the editing and the parts that we do and that we work, you know, sort of a steady, hard 3 days on, I mean, that's maybe a couple week process. And then there's the printing and the design and all the other stuff. But when it gets in the hand, yeah, it's a process. It's like you said at the beginning, it's the little bit of how the sausage is made.
Yeah. And then when you think of the timing, of course, it lands here and we've got, you know, Benito on the roll and these couple guys, it really is a treat. So make sure you check it out. Nate Lundy here, you normally see you bring it as a Christmas. What's going on? Nate's showing up with stuff.
Seems like it. I mean,
check this out. Okay. So,
welcome to the show, Nate Lundy.
Oh, hi everybody. Hi. It's great because Doug's here. Like I don't have to do anything on the show. It's just these guys. But you got to check this out. Did you guys know that Abercrombie and Fitch does this throwback NFL stuff?
You mean NFL? I was gonna say it's my closet. Is the Abercrombie throwback?
It's all.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I get it.
Cream colors. Yeah.
Check this.
There.
Hold
okay,
on. Check this out. Check this out. Check this out. All right.
Go retro. Okay.
So the throwback. This is so cool.
I love that.
So
Not
our
even
buddy
a Super
Bob,
Bowl one. That's a conference. That's an AFC.
That's an
conference
AFC conference championship one.
That's fun.
From '89. Okay, so check this out. Hold on, Doug. Here we go. Let's go back to AFC championship champions, January 31st, right? 87, right?
I'm waiting for you to pull one of these out that I own.
Hold on.
Like that one.
That I owned.
The Dan Reeves.
7th grade.
That's the Dan Reeves right there. That's the
this
old.
Is totally Dan Reeves.
That's Dan Reeves right there.
So our buddy, our buddy Bob Broderick, we all know we love Bob. What's up, Bob? Was talking to the folks at Abercrombie. Was like, you got to show the guys in Denver what you're doing. Do you see?
Oh, we got some goodies.
See what they sent us?
Nice.
Merry Christmas to us.
Who's us?
That's a good question. Is Nate just kidding?
Everybody.
You just kidding out your whole family and
but here's what's actually here's what's fun. Bob sent. So I'm showing these off right now. These are for,
by the way, for Bob.
These are for the crew. They're for us. Okay, but he also sent a couple. They've got women's in these.
Nice.
I'm not sure that my daughter has taken hers off since I gave it to her a few days ago. But like, we got a hood here. Here, Doug
probably had some form of that.
Yeah.
Hold that up for me.
Yeah, that looks familiar.
There's 32 champs.
There you go.
Folks, it goes on and on. So I just want to throw this out here. If you're looking for
a Christmas
for some holiday gifts, for some Christmas gift ideas for Broncos fans, obviously everybody's in a great mood here in the bye week with the way the team has been doing. Go online. You got to check this out. And by the way, if you are, I know this is kind of sacrilegious for me to say here, so we'll say it a little bit quieter. If you're a fan of other teams, they have other teams as well. But mostly we're just here to promote the Broncos stuff. This stuff is so awesome. I got like huge shout out to Bob for doing this, but
you could actually, you could convince somebody that
tomorrow's show.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a good one here. Sean, hold that one up.
Oh yeah. Okay.
On tomorrow's show, obviously Dan Mormon will participate again.
Oh yeah.
As he always does on Fridays here on Football Fridays, where we're going to preview the state championships for high school football. Dan is already you guys are screwed because Dan's already been staking a claim on stuff over here. So look, huge thank you to our friends at Abercrombie and Fitch for hooking us up with these. Bob, thank you as well. I was
thinking about this. The last time that I was a real consumer of Abercrombie.
This is freaking sweet, man.
The last time I was buying Abercrombie stuff, though, I was pretty cool.
I mean, I don't think I could ever pull it off before.
I'm kind of thinking that if I start buying it again, I can return to being cool.
We always think that.
I'm telling you, like I said, my daughter,
we'd be cool in here.
My daughter has one of the Super Bowl 32 sweatshirts. That Abercrombie hooked it up so that she would have one, my wife would have one as well. I'm telling you, like she thinks it is the coolest damn thing, and they are ridiculously soft, which she also really likes. So everybody at Creek has been like, "Where'd you get that?" So there you go. I just wanted to share that with you. I know you guys got a show to do, but this box showed up, and I was like, I got to show these guys. This is so cool. All right, I'll get out of the way now. Sorry. Bye, everybody. Happy Thursday.
Dave. Appreciate it.
At first, I thought you were
bet on David Montgomery to have a touchdown tonight.
All right. Well, while Doug and Nate rifle through their stuff, and they're going to leave me.
There's not going to be anything left for Sean.
Yeah, it's going to be
Trust me.
Triple XL thing that I'm going to have to wear like a drape.
Peace.
But thanks, guys. But want to turn our attention up north. We're up in Fort Collins, very sort of under the radar, obviously, because so much of the news in college football is centered around the CU Buffaloes today for the Big 12 conference. Shedeur Sanders named Offensive Player of the Year. Travis Hunter named Defensive Player of the Year. But joining us to talk a little bit about Fort Collins here, because it's a fascinating story up in FOCO where the Rams went 8-4 this year in Jay Norvell's third season. And turnaround has been pretty significant. They're now moving to the Pac-12 on the day that was announced. We had the president and the athletic director there. Tyler King of the Denver Gazette is joining us. And Tyler, thanks so much for talking about this, because I think with the Buffs and Deion Sanders kind of blotting out the sun, the success that CSU had this year has kind of gone a little bit under the radar, but it wasn't unnoticed by the Pac-12 elevating them. Well, they'll be moving soon enough. What's the state of the Rams as it looks today?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sean. Always appreciate you inviting me on. Happy to come on and talk about the Rams. I mean, yeah, I cover the Buffs mainly, but also, the Rams too. Try to cover a little bit of everything here in Colorado. But it was a fascinating season in Fort Collins. I mean, like you mentioned, they go 8-4. Last season, they kind of had the heartbreak of losing a bowl game on the last play of the game in Hawaii. That seems to be the place where bowl dreams go to die for Mountain West teams oftentimes. But great turnaround. I mean, the Mountain West was not good this year. It's just probably, if I had to say why the Rams season has gone a little bit under the radar, because, I mean, everyone talks about what Boise's done, especially with Ashton Genty being a likely Heisman finalist at this point. And Colorado State was in the race to make the conference title game up until the last 2 weeks when they lost at Fresno State. Similar situation to CU when they lost to Kansas, losing control of their own destiny was very similar. But I think it's just because some of the wins maybe weren't as impressive as you would expect. I mean, it's not the air raid offense everyone expected when Jay Norvell was hired. Like, they really leaned into this West Coast run-heavy offense this season, led by kind of the offensive line, which was really the strength of the team. Like, they have some legit, really good players on that offensive line, one of which, Jacob Gardner, the center, could play in the NFL. And they had a variety of talented running backs that they just kind of leaned on. Especially after the injury to Torrey Horton, who was, a future NFL receiver. He went down midway through the season with a knee injury that was season ending. So just kind of perfect storm to lean into the run and lean on this veteran offensive line. And so maybe it wasn't a sexy Rams offense, and some of the score lines weren't overly impressive, but the record, speaks for itself at 8-4. It was an impressive year, but I get there's certainly some Ram fans a little uneasy with some of the performances. Freddie Banks, the defensive coordinator, was let go yesterday in the midst of them adding a smaller, recruiting class than they usually do from high school ranks. So it seems like a little bit is changing up there, despite some of the good news that people would expect with an 8-4 season.
Yeah, and I was impressed. You brought up that very good point. When Torrey Horton went down, so much of the offense ran through him, and the Rams were able to kind of persevere, adjusted, and found a way to still grind out wins, which is impressive. I always tell people that, winning close games is a skill. And even if it's a game you didn't expect to be close, finding a way to win those close games, that's a skill. And it was impressive. But yeah, you're seeing after this season, though, it's kind of interesting. You have kids hitting the transfer portal. You have the release, like you were talking about. What is the reason after maybe a season that's surprisingly successful? We'll find out what bowl they go to on Sunday. But what's the reason for the turnover? It kind of seems like this is where this would be kind of a force multiplier, right? Is this Is it have something to do with the conference changes? Is it have something to do with the way the offense maybe isn't the air raid a lot of people expected? Because I'm just surprised to see the defections and the changes after a season that looks to be so successful.
Yeah, the transfer portal defections, I think, doesn't surprise me all that much. It's two young wide receivers, the two leading receivers on the team this year, and Caleb Goody and Jamari Person, two sophomores that they were high on. That doesn't surprise me too much. It's just kind of the state of college football, especially for group of five programs like CSU, who just don't have the NIL money, the resources to keep really talented players around. It's something that happened last season for the Rams when they lost guys like another pair of sophomores and Justice Ross Simmons and Lewis Brown IV. Those guys ended up Lewis Brown ended up in the Mountain West still at San Diego State, but Justice Ross Simmons ended up at Syracuse in the ACC. So you see a lot of that for lower programs. But I mean, the defensive coordinator switch didn't really surprise me all that much. You kind of hearing things throughout the year about that it's not the greatest relationship. Him and Freddie Banks and Jay Norvell didn't always see eye to eye on things. So, Freddie had been there since Jay took over. Freddie came from Montana State, an FCS powerhouse, but it just felt like that kind of change was coming. I mean, the defense did struggle at times this season, but that was a veteran group that did what it had to in some of the games. But I think there was a lot of unease early in the season, especially after they lost to CU and the way they did. They just really weren't competitive. And obviously Torrey Horton was still healthy at that point. Everybody was still healthy for the Rams, and they just didn't really match up at all with CU in that game at Canvas Stadium in September. And maybe there were some thoughts then about, well, if Jay Norvell doesn't turn this around, maybe he doesn't come back for a fourth season, which obviously with what he did in Mountain West play earned himself another year. But you mentioned kind of the Pac-12 and that move coming up in 2026. I mean, I think there's just CSU wants to be heading and feeling good heading into that move, and you want to have some momentum behind you. And that's why I think that even though this season was good, 8-4, tied for second in the Mountain West, just missing out on a tiebreaker with UNLV to get into the conference title game. It's objectively a good season. I mean, I think it's exactly what I predicted going into the year. I think I had them at 8-4, right around third or fourth in the conference. But I think that's a lot of that's due to just how bad the Mountain West was this year. I mean, you just look around. They took advantage of beating up on a bad Air Force season, a bad Wyoming season, which it's important. They hadn't won those trophies in years. It was the first time under Norvell that they had won any kind of rivalry game when they beat both those teams. And that's important, and it's important to build off that too. But it just didn't feel perfect, if you know what I mean. And they want to have plenty of momentum going into the Pac-12 in 2026. So that's why I think 2025, there's just even added pressure on that. I don't know if you're expecting 8-4 again. It'll depend on what the roster looks like. They're going to add in the transfer portal. And it seems like they're adapting to that as well and getting away from their insistence on being a high school development program. It seems like they're going to try to lean into the portal a little bit more than they had in the past. So it depends on the roster, but it depends on who the new coordinator is and all that. But you kind of want to see the Rams just kind of keep this up in 2025 to see what the administration wants to do about Jay Norvell. Because like I said multiple times now, momentum is the key for them heading into the Pac-12 in 2026.
Well, Tyler, you cover the Buffs as well for the Gazette, so you're kind of your finger on college football's pulse here in Colorado. And Deion Sanders, I think from a couple years ago, the perception is that he was proven right in the way he attacks the transfer portal. The idea, he talked a little bit about 3 weeks ago about the idea of recruiting high school kids. He's only going to recruit kids out of high school that can play immediately, a la Jordan Seaton, guys you can plug in, because he realizes that guys don't start, guys go somewhere else. And so why recruit for another team? But Colorado's success obviously can also aid Colorado State's success. We know that the overtime game last year was the most watched ESPN regular season broadcast in primetime in history, even though it ended at 2:00 in the morning on the East Coast. They had another national appearance. Of course, all of Colorado's games are nationally televised. They were the only team in the country that had that, but that's a good look for Colorado State too. And when they were competitive, I get it that maybe they're not competing for the exact same players, but people look at the state of Colorado, and it seems like that rising tide can lift all boats.
Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, and that's what CSU is trying to take advantage of by moving to the Pac-12. I mean, maybe the Pac-12 didn't add some of the teams they expected, and it's kind of just like a 1A version of the Mountain West, where the Mountain West is going to be a 1B version of itself. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what that leads to. But I mean, yeah, there is plenty of attention on the state, and when Colorado's bad, Colorado State sometimes they can avoid having some of the same pitfalls. But when Colorado's good, Colorado State also has to take advantage of that and all the attention. Like you said, the game this year was on CBS, and I think they were a little disappointed with how they performed in that game. Obviously, losing 28-9 was the final, just not really being in it. It felt like, especially in that entire second half, once CU kind of made some adjustments. But yeah, I mean, there are certainly good players in the state of Colorado, and it was rare to see a recruiting class yesterday for CSU that didn't include a player from Colorado. I mean, you would expect that from the Deion Sanders Buffs, but they even had a player from Loveland in the class yesterday. So it's interesting to see kind of the direction that CSU is going under Jay Norvell. And obviously, recruiting is all about relationships, and Jay's are kind of in California, Texas, places he's recruited for a long time, at the various stops he's been at, whether it was Oklahoma, at Texas, when he was head coach at Nevada. He's kind of been everywhere on this western half of the country. So that's kind of what he leans into, and they're not afraid to go anywhere to get players. But it just feels like maybe they're missing out a little bit on a chance to really hone in on this area here in Colorado, because like you said, with Deion Sanders, those guys are just focusing on anybody they can get, top 100, top 300 players they can get that can play right away. Obviously they go out and get Julian Lewis yesterday, the 5-star QB, who looks like he could be the next star for the Buffs. So it really is going to be an interesting next couple months for the Rams, just to see how they capitalize on an objectively good 8-4 season. You see the record, it's good. Where they finished in the Mountain West, like they have the resources to be one of the top teams in the Mountain West, and same for when they do move to the Pac-12. Like they could be that if they take advantage of it. It's just all about if Jay Norvell can continue this momentum, and if he can continue to prove that he's the guy for that.
Pivoting over to the Buffs, because that is an interesting point. Obviously, Deion Sanders is recruiting, it's nationally, and he did get one of the kids from Colorado, but that's because they nationally felt that was a comfort level. But getting Julian Lewis is a big story, but when I look at it, I think the story where everything got buried was that Deion Sanders isn't going anywhere. Julian Lewis doesn't decommit from USC and come to Colorado unless he knows that Deion Sanders is staying for at least another 2 years. And that, to me, is kind of the story, because ever since he came here, the idea is that where's Sanders going to go next? That Colorado is a stepping stone to his next gig. But he's not an NFL-style coach, and I think he knows that. He said his objective is to continue to help raise young men. The brand for Colorado is now not even necessarily win national championships. The pitch from Sanders and the Buffs is, do you want to play on Sundays? Then come to Colorado. We're going to get you drafted. We're going to get you playing on Sundays. So it's a very clever end around where you don't have to compete with the Ohio States and the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world and say it's national championship or bust. We're actually not asking you to join a long line of people that won titles. We're telling you we're here to help you go play on Sundays. That seems to be Deion's niche, and he's carved it out very, very well here. Why move? And I've questioned that for everybody who comes around and says, oh, well, Deion's going to go somewhere else. Why would he? He's now got a top 25 program that he built essentially from scratch. It was a 1-win program 2 years ago, and he's recruiting, he's getting guys to flip from the top colleges in the country. He's grabbing top 300 guys. You're going to lose Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, guys that might be picked, both of them in the top 5 of the NFL draft, and already you're looking about a replacement in Julian Lewis, and we know about the receiver depth at CU. It's remarkable, and you presume the cornerback position with Deion Sanders himself recruiting, it shouldn't be too hard to get some guys either. This builds upon itself very quickly in the transfer portal, because you don't have to wait like you used to, right? When you're talking about recruiting and you have to wait 2 years, 3 years for these to bubble up. He's just going and plucking ready-made starters off of teams that can't retain them because they have a little bit too much talent. There's no reason for Sanders to go anywhere now or even really in the future, because everything he said he's wanted is right there in Boulder.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the point I make too. I mean, like, why he's able to do kind of whatever he wants at Colorado. They were a desperate program after the 2022 season, looking for any kind of shot in the arm to reignite the program that had really fallen out of the national spotlight in a huge way. Just no longer the program it had been in the late 80s, early 90s, even a little bit in the early 2000s when they won the Big 12. I mean, just a completely different program now 2 years later after Deion Sanders is hired. And he's able to do what he wants. He is, like you said, he is built for college football and built for the stage that, built for what it's all about. Like, he is not as much of an NFL guy, even though he has done a good job of bringing in NFL talent in terms of coaching. And I think that's really what appeals to the players as well. It's just, you got Robert Livingston, a guy who was in the NFL for a long time, has been a great hire, defensive coordinator. Pat Shermer was a coordinator and head coach in the NFL for a long time. All these position coaches that have either played or coached or both in the NFL. I mean, you just look at the instant impact that a guy like Warren Sapp has made. Everyone kind of questioned that hire when it happened, but everyone has spoken glowingly about his impact on the defensive line group. And you're, like you said, you're not even competing with the likes of Alabama, Ohio State, because they're in a different conference. In the 12-team playoff era and the guarantee for the 5 conference champions, you're just competing in the Big 12. And there really isn't an elite program that you're really worried about. Like, everyone maybe thought Utah or Oklahoma State, just with the history with their coaches. They had terrible seasons in the Big 12. I mean, look who's in the Big 12 championship game. It's Arizona State, who was picked to finish last in the preseason media poll. Iowa State was up there too, but that's just, I mean, BYU was picked to finish near the bottom. CU was picked to finish 11th. I mean, it's a pretty crazy conference that is up for grabs, and there is a chance for Colorado to seize maybe the top spot in the conference. They're certainly right now, with Coach Prime at the helm, the biggest brand in the conference, and there's no reason to leave that behind when all you have to do is win your conference and you're in the playoff every year. Like that, and that's a great selling point to go along with what you said, the emphasis on getting guys to the NFL, while also acknowledging that not every one of your players is going to make the NFL. And CU also has a great educational background for you to kind of, and Coach Prime has all these contacts for whatever you want to do after football as well. So, yeah, I mean, CU is set up so well for the future here, let alone just the talent that we've mentioned that they've signed yesterday, and with the early period opening. So, and you mentioned the transfer portal too. I mean, just look at all the guys that they brought in last offseason that made instant impacts this season. Guys like DJ McKinney, cornerback, BJ Green, who was the defensive newcomer of the year in the Big 12. The wide receivers like LaJohntay Wester, Will Shepard, all of these guys were transfers that came in either in January or even in the summer and just were able to make instant impacts. And kind of Deion Sanders' pragmatic approach to this, where it's like high school is like the NFL draft, where you're getting guys that some you hope can play right away and be big-time contributors. Some you're going to try and develop and take chances on guys that you think have potential. Whereas, transfer portal is free agency, and it's free agency without a salary cap. So you can go out and get, whoever you want. And I think Colorado has done a good job of increasing, NIL opportunities and stuff like that. I mean, Coach Prime is everywhere. You can't watch a sporting event without seeing him on a commercial somewhere. And just the amount of exposure that is in Boulder right now is got to be so appealing to high school kids, the transfer portal kids. And even with Shedeur and Travis being gone, like those are guys who are big draws to want to play with them. But even now, it's just kind of following in the footsteps. And, after a 9-3 season, there's just so much to build on. And, I think there are some really good coaches in the Big 12, like Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State, that you're going to have to compete with over the next couple of years. But mostly, I mean, Colorado has got to be one of the top teams to watch going forward in the Big 12. And I would not be surprised. I would actually expect in the next 3-4 years, as long as Coach Prime stays in Boulder, they are going to be a team that wins the Big 12 at least once and makes the playoff. I don't think that's a stretch at all. I think that's something that's going to happen if he sticks around.
Yeah, it does feel like they have an opportunity to really cement themselves as kind of the crown jewel of that conference as long as he sticks around. And so I guess that's the last question for you, Tyler. We know at the beginning of the year, prior to the season, Deion said the CU opened discussions about a contract extension, and Sanders wanted to table them. And at the time I pointed out, well, wisely so. Now that started the rumor mill of, he wants out. No, this is very clear. He thought he had a team that was going to go to at least a bowl game and wanted to negotiate after that, and the turnaround, and then he wanted to negotiate. You can see why right now. When do you think that contract extension happens? How significant do you think it will be?
I think CU's got to be eager to get that done as soon as they can this offseason. I mean, this is something that people, donors, big-time people have been talking about inside, outside the program since the TCU game. Like, I think everyone has kind of understood the impact immediately and trying to make sure they keep Coach Prime around and instantly realizing kind of how big this is going to get really quickly at CU. If you just look at his salary, it's just nowhere near some of the top coaches in the country. And obviously, there was a big commitment for CU to give Coach Prime the original contract they did. It was way bigger than anything else they had ever given out. The assistant coach money pool has grown larger and larger every year, which obviously has paid off with some of the hires that Deion has made. So you're right. He's got all the leverage in the world after this season. The high school class he brought in helps as well, just kind of. And if he's able to quickly add some other transfers here in December and in January, that'll help as well. I mean, CU's got to want to keep this going. Like, you can't let this guy leave. If he wants to go to the NFL, which I doubt, And I know you feel that as well. Feel that way as well. Like if he wants to do that, you're not going to stand in his way. If the Raiders come calling and they're like, we're going to draft Shador, we're going to hire you to run the show as well. You can't really get in the way of that, but you can't let him leave for another program, especially not ones that are open right now. Like, I don't think he would leave this offseason. I mean, there are intriguing jobs that could come open in the future, whether it's like Arkansas, Auburn, LSU, stuff like that in the SEC. But that's not this offseason. And you have this offseason to take care of that contract, give him the raise he deserves, because he is printing money for the school. I mean, a lot of the merchandise has his name on it and he gets a cut of that. But I mean, CU is nowhere near the shape it is if they go a different route after that 1-11 season, even if they hire just a regular run-of-the-mill good coach. I mean, they're nowhere near where they are right now. So you got to do whatever it takes to let him, to keep him in Boulder for as long as he wants to coach, because for as long as he wants to coach, CU is going to benefit from it if he sticks around.
Yeah, you want that to be synonymous. Makes $5.7 million right now. That's 38th among college head coaches, a $14 million buyout. But if you want to get him into the top 10 or so, you're talking about 10 million plus. And you're talking about essentially probably doubling that. Kirby Smart of Georgia, the top one this year, 13.2 million. Dabo Swinney at 11.1. I think you have to go to 10. There are 5 coaches that make more than 10 million a year. And that's probably where you have to put Deion Sanders, even though he doesn't have the title, even though he doesn't have that. But the ability to increase your visibility, like we said, the only team in college football to have every single one of its game televised, it's hard to put a dollar amount on that, and it feels like it has to get done. But the bright side is Deion Sanders seems to be perfectly happy, perfectly comfortable. Like so many athletes we've seen that get traded to Colorado or move to Colorado, when they start talking about, oh, well, I can be on the East Coast in just a couple hours and the West Coast in a couple hours, and I could be in Texas here, they start to realize that, like, wait a minute, I'm not on the coast. This is a pretty great place to be and a pretty great place to live. And they don't go anywhere. And you see that with Peyton Manning. You see that with a lot of other guys that have these big footprints, and they realize you can be absolutely as big in Denver if you have that kind of footprint as you can anywhere else. So all systems go for Coach Prime and the Buffs, it seems.
Yeah, it seems like that for sure. I mean, he's made that comment a couple weeks ago about, having that kickstand down, being comfortable. And I get the hesitancy just because he's a guy that had no real ties to the state of Colorado, to Denver at all before coming here. He's a guy that, grew up in Florida, spent his playing days in Texas, where he was coaching his sons kind of growing up in the Dallas area. I kind of get the hesitancy that he might kind of go to the SEC as soon as his sons are done playing. And that's kind of, I honestly felt that way too. Like, this might just be a 2-year thing for Coach Prime, but he's seemed to love it here. I mean, and anybody can see kind of his interactions with people like Peggy Copham. I mean, just like how genuine, the love is kind of going both ways between him and Boulder. And the CU program has been really unique and fun to see for someone who is just, like I said, had no ties at all. He's really embraced it. And obviously the community has embraced him, and they want to keep him around here, like I said, for as long as he wants to coach, because he is just I covered that 2022 season. It got really bad. And just to see, I think it was the 2-year anniversary was like yesterday of when Coach Prime's introductory press conference was, and just where they are now. We're getting ready to cover a bowl game here in a couple weeks. So it's just really fascinating to see where that's gone and where it could go in the next couple of years if he sticks it out.
Yeah, bounce back season for Air Force and college football becomes really interesting in the state of Colorado. Again, it's a lot of fun when it is, and Tyler King covers all of it for the Denver Gazette. Make sure you give him a follow and check out everything he's putting together, and hopefully we get a chance to talk about this again, maybe closer to the bowl games. We can touch base, but Tyler, really appreciate looking at both of these programs that are in a fascinating state of change right now. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you so much, Tyler King from the Denver Gazette. Terrific deep dive information there, obviously, on both of those programs. It will be interesting. Bowl selection committee, of course, will happen after the championship games this weekend. We should know about the bowls for both the Rams and the Buffs on Sunday. And, of course, maybe the biggest news of the year in college football will be the Heisman of voting, which, of course, at the moment, Travis Hunter is the prohibitive favorite to win the Heisman. That would be Colorado second by only Rashaan Salam, of course. So we'll find out more as it goes along. Tomorrow will be a football Friday, even though the Broncos are off, and even though the Buffs are off, and even though the Rams are off. There's football to talk about. There's a lot of things going on, and we'll include the state championships for 3A, 4A, and 5A football. We'll have Dan Mormon of Colorado Preps join us for that. Remember, in the magazine, too, by the way, great feature from Dan on Mountain Vista quarterback Austin Majewski. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about him tomorrow as well from Dan Mormon. Doug Ottewill joined us earlier today to talk about the new Mile High Sports magazines, how all those came together. Terrific stuff in this one. We're very proud of it. See those covers up above us there, one with Pat Surtain, one with Aaron Gordon. Content's the same in either. Pick out the one you like, grab one. The other one's the stocking stuffer for a friend. Terrific content in there for you. So thanks to Doug for explaining all of us. Nate Lundy stopped by and showed us the new line of throwback NFL gear from Abercrombie & Fitch 2. Shout out to Bob Broderick and X-Tech, the terrific pad company, of course, that has taken over so much of college and NFL sports. Shout out to Bob, always a good guy. Always get a chance to connect with him whenever we can. So thanks. Danny Bailey is the man that makes all of this work. Alex Becker will be joining us tomorrow with that role, and he's sitting there right next to Danny, working it all out, which thank goodness, because I don't know what any of those buttons do, and I don't even want to get near that table. So looking forward to Alex joining us tomorrow as well. Thanks to you. Any way you're catching this, whether you're live, whether you're catching it later, we appreciate it. Look forward to getting back with you tomorrow for Doug, for Nate, for Tyler King, for Danny, for Alex, for all of us here at Mile High Sports. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with Football Friday. I'm Sean Drotar, and you are in the right place. Live, local, independent, every team, every day. This is Mile High Sports.